you look at the lessons dealing with these, like the next two chapters, 16 and 17, we're kind of bringing together because we're in the second triad of speeches. So we've heard them all before. We've heard Job before. And now in this section of chapters 15 to 21, we're hearing them come again, and there's not really anything new. There's different ideas presented, but the same thought pattern is there. And I think we can grab hold of that, and just reinforces where the problem is. That by this time we should not be agreeing with Job's friends, nor should we be agreeing with Job while we sympathize with Job. Is that where you are? It's where I am. Job doesn't have it together. He's getting real close of thinking that God is his enemy. In fact, he says that. And because he doesn't have an answer. And you're going to see, you can put holes in the arguments of his friends that indeed it's not according to reality, and yet they're looking at their experiences to determine the fact that, Job, the reason you're suffering is because you're a sinner. And God is punishing you. We know that's not right. And their arguments have holes, and we'll kind of put the holes in there because they don't have it right either. But during times of suffering, how often do we have it right? And what happens with our study of Job is that maybe we will be thinking right when the time comes. That when we go through our difficulties, we have no answers and we wonder why it's me and why I'm going through this. I'm trying to be a Christian, and why is that happening? Behind the scenes, we know that God allowed the devil to test Job. And it's a testing process, and it tries our faith. And at the end, we must trust in God, who is on our side, and gain strength from the chastisement that is taking place in our life. Realize what's important, maybe what's not, and continue to realize he's the most important one that we need to serve and trust him. For at the end, as James will tell us about Job, he was blessed at the end abundantly, and God indeed was behind that as well. So we started with the agony. When you look at chapter 16, and just we'll see the agony first. We'll kind of examine the testimony of righteousness that he has. I might as well just put those up there. And then the waning of hope. And that will come in chapter 17. So I'm not just jumping around here and thinking, what should I think about? It follows this pattern. See if that's not so. Let's look at the agony. And we first of all, listen to the first 5 verses. Job says, if I were speaking and you were in my situation, I would not have treated you the way you treated me. How did they said, verse 4, I also could speak as ye do. Your soul, it said, if your soul were in my soul's stead, I could join words together against you and shake my head. You're a sinner. I could put words together. I could do that. But listen, what would he do? I would strengthen you with my mouth. And I would, and the solace of my lips would assuage your grief. A beautiful way of saying that. We're going to keep back the flood of your grief. That's what I would do with my words. If you were in my shoes, I would strengthen you. And I would assuage your grief. I would take away the basis of your grief. I would kind of mop up all of the gall that we're going to see on the ground because of the bitterness. I'd mop that up. I would keep it from surfacing. I would keep it like stopping a dam. That's what he said he would do. And that's going to be a key, and we'll have that at the end of this lesson. That's what have I learned about this? And I think, to me, that is a key verse to help me understand when I see a brother, sister, friend, someone going through suffering, we have no answers for what's happening, and there's not another answer, kind of like Job's going through. I will kind of know they may not need a sermon, they just may need an ear. They just need somebody to be there. And these friends would have done a lot better if they had just stayed silent and stayed with it. They did that for a week. Then they couldn't be silent any longer. So we started with that. Now look at the idea of he and they. Who you think the he is, and who's the they? This is his agony. He hath torn me in his wrath, and persecuted me. He hath gnashed upon me with his teeth. Mine adversary sharpeneth his eyes upon me. They have gaped open me with their mouth. What's happening? Who's the he? God. Who's the they? So-called friends. Who else do I have? That's agony. And it's like he's just thrown me to the ground, gnashed his teeth, and now he's my adversary. He sharpened his eyes upon me. They've gaped open with me with their mouth. They smitten me upon the cheek reproachfully. They gathered themselves together against me. Now that's agony of just saying, where, and you might say, well, that's the waning of hope. Well, who else, and that could be true. Where's my hope? It's not my friends, and right now, it seems God is my adversary. Here's another agony. God delivereth me to the ungodly, and causeth me, and casteth me in the hands of the wicked. Who allowed this? Who did this? God did. That's the way he feels, and God did. God brought this upon him and allowed the devil to do this. Verse 12. He said, I was at ease, and he brake me asunder. He had taken me by the neck and dashed me to pieces. He's like a wild animal. He's like an animal that grabbed me by the neck and just shut me to the ground. That's what he's broken me. He's talking about God. He's also set me, verse 13. He also set me for his mark. His archers compass me around about. He cleaveth my reins asunder and doth not spare. He poured out my gall upon the ground. That's what I said a while ago. His bitterness is on the ground. He's been run asunder by a spear, but in that case, the archers, what do the archers shoot? They shoot an arrow. It went through his kidney, and he brings out, and he spills his bitterness on the ground. That's where he is. That's where he's thinking is. And that's not good. It's real and it's raw. And God never hides that from us. And that to me is some of the agony that he's going through. Now, where do you find his testimony? Testimony of righteousness. While this is happening, he thinks God is his enemy. God's allowed this. God's saying, who else would allow it? God. He's not helping me. I'm still in this situation. So we got that going. And that might add to the waning of hope. But to me, there's the agony there. All of a sudden, you see something happening in verse 17. And where would you put this verse? What category? Although there's no violence in my hands, and my prayer is pure. What's that? It's a testimony of righteousness, isn't it? My prayers are pure. There's no violence in my hands. Why am I going through this? He hasn't given up on himself, even though he's questioning God. Even now, verse 19, behold, my witness is in heaven. Who is in heaven? It's the he that's taking me by the neck and throwing me to the ground. But he said, my witness is in heaven. I know God sees, and there's just some reason I can't put it together, and my friends haven't helped me any. I don't understand. It's he that voucheth for me is on high. He still thinks if he could have an umpire, if he could have a moment to be before God in judgment, he would vindicate himself. But that court date's not set. Now we'll come back and talk more about that in verses 19 and 20 because we got another question about that. And and I'll put 21 with that. So let's go into chapter 17. And just to jump to the end in verse 15, where then is my hope? Waiting of hope, this would be the verse that you probably look at. And as for my hope, who shall see it? I'm not going to see it. Why? Because my hope is in jail. Listen to the next verse. It shall go down to the bars of Sheol. It can't get out. My hope can't get out. When once there is rest in the dust, when I'm through, and I'm in the dust, and therefore my body is at peace, Sheol, my hope, will still be locked up in the grave. Does that sound like hope? And yet in chapter 19:25, in this same section, he says, I know that my Redeemer liveth, and that ain't Jesus. Job didn't understand that. It's what Psalm 19, where God is my refuge and God is my Redeemer. He didn't know about Jesus redeeming him from his sins. I mean, if he did, I would look at that. He's just wishing for an umpire, and we know, well, that umpire is Jesus. So when he sees Redeemer, he's saying God's going to redeem him. But here is the feeling of he's losing his hope. He's got that one side of him, but he has a testimony of righteousness. And we're going to see him come from this point of waning of hope, and all of a sudden you'll see him at the height of his faith in chapter 19. And hopefully we've studied that. Our Redeemer liveth. And after I am dead in the flesh, I'm going to see him again. His faith goes way up here, and then it goes way down here. Does that sound like someone going through persecution? Does that sound like someone going through a lot of oppression? Does that sound like someone going through a lot of depression? Oh, just up, down. I know God this, but he thrown me to the ground. I want you to sense that, because that's here. That's in the text. And we can kind of group them into, this is their thoughts, this is his thought, and we can look at Job that way. But I think it should help us when people are so erratic in their emotions at a time when they don't have answers to why their life is turned upside down. We might understand why. Because we've read Job very carefully. We've looked at Job. And that's where he is. In the same book, in the same section, we see him way down here. And that's life too. That's the way things are going. So between chapter 17 and verse 1, and we look at verse 9, here's a testimony. Yet shall the righteous hold on his way, and he that hath clean hands shall wax stronger and stronger. That's a testimony of righteousness. Verse 6 says, upright men shall be astonished at this, of what I'm going through, and the innocent shall say of himself shall stir up himself against the godless. They hate, look at what Job has done. They'll be against the godless. They're going to get stronger and stronger. There's no waning of hope. There's a testimony of righteousness. That stands. He hasn't lost that we're looking at. And verse 4 says, for thou hast hid their heart from understanding, therefore shalt thou not exalt them. They don't have understanding, but it seems like God, you're putting them on side against me. He that denounceth his friends for a prey, they denounce me to satisfy the thoughts of others. It's even the eyes of his children shall fail. This is in chapter 17. Job said that the eyes of their, I guess this is Job speaking, that it's going to affect their children. Not that their children inherit the sins of the father, but they sure do inherit the consequences. And Job says they're going to fail. Because he's seeing that has happened. Consequences of sin because of parents. They do happen. Drunkards and children suffer, not because their father's drunk, yet because their father is drunk. They suffer. And that's what Job is going after. And so there's a sense of what's righteous with him. He still holds on to the testimony that he is still pure, and yet he doesn't understand things because of what he's going through. I just wanted to see that all of those three things that's going through Job right now, and it will get better. So let's come back to question number 7 in chapter 6 and verse 19 and 20. It says, "Even now, behold, my witness is in heaven." And it says, "He that voucheth for me is on high. My friends scoff at me, but mine eye poureth out tears unto God." Has he given up on God? Still praying to him. He's prayed through his tears. But God hasn't listened to him, he thinks. Verse 21. "That he would maintain the right of a man with God and of a son of man with his neighbor." I get along with my neighbors because I'm right and do righteousness, and I would be right with God. "For when a few years are come, I shall go the way whence I shall not return." Well, you may come back as a bug, Job. Reincarnation's right. No, reincarnation not it. I'm gone. I'm never going to be back. This is it. And that's where we get in chapter 17. It ends with the waning of his hope. So what was Job resting in verses 19 and 20? What was his confidence? David? And what does he think when he says maintain? He will maintain the right of a man with God. That principle won't change. It just doesn't happen to me right now. He'll get there. So it's a man having to what? We call it wait on the Lord. That becomes a little phrase. Wait on the Lord. Well, what does it mean to wait? I don't have my answers yet. But I'm not going to give up on God. And I'm not going to give up on the integrity of my own being. You have to wait. And that's very hard to do. But we wait in faith. We wait in anticipation. He's going to return again, and we'll be saved them that wait unto him to salvation. That's eagerly waiting. Ready for God to return because we know the blessings that are ahead of us, and we, especially at a time of suffering. But we should say that or let man be accursed if we cannot say that. But there's the sense of he maintains what is right. It just, I don't sense it that's happening here, and I don't have an answer. And I think we see that real well. All right, we've taken chapter 17. Here's Bildad. Describe in those 18:2-4, describe Bildad's attitude. So you're seeing this unfold, and you're sitting by the campfire, and you see that happening. What's his attitude? What is his attitude toward Job? Yeah.
And that's how it starts out. And then after that, he wants Job to put the garden him, Bildad, and his friends too.
Yeah.
And then he thinks of Job, you think the earth is going to bend to whatever you're going through. You know, should the earth have to follow the fact that you're getting persecuted?
Yeah. They about had it with him, hadn't they? so much for being an ear. They're speaking. And so all of Job's description of where he is emotionally, we might call it that, where his mind is because of his faith, and that hasn't changed, they're not listening. It doesn't make any sense to them because, one, I've got the answer, and you're a sinner. That's just the way it is. And so many times we're so arrogant. We think this ought to fit, and it doesn't fit in your life, it ought to fit. And there's something wrong with you. And we sometimes need to have the humility. Maybe I don't have the answer. I don't know. And sometimes we have to find ourselves wait on the Lord. I know the sovereignty of God, and I'm not going to make an excuse because I'm being persecuted that God's not sovereign. I'm not going to go there. And yet I know also that he opened up Job to be tested. I'm not going to deny that. Why should I? It's the truth. And I know who would like to destroy you. Not God. And those are the moments that I will take another day of this, God, to glorify you in my life. There's a strength of faith that comes through. And I hope that will equip us in our lonely nights and maybe days or months and years of going through difficult trials, that we'll have that kind of strength. But he's just, as you say, he's tired of your words. I'm tired of hearing them. If you will just consider, and afterwards we'll speak. I don't want to hear another word from you, Job. No, that's not helpful. Job has spent a lot of time explaining things, just like they have. So, we come to where now Bildad describes the wicked person in this particular section. And he starts off with verse 5, the light of the wicked. He describes, here's what is his dark description of the wicked man. So when you put all those verses together, starting with verse 5. What about his light, the light? You know, there's good favor, there's understanding, there's light of righteousness, and everything's going good with me, everything's light, it's good. What happens? Turns to darkness, doesn't it? The light of the wicked shall be put out. The spark of the fire shall not shine, and the light shall be a dark in his tent. That's where you go for refuge at night, the tent. It's going to be dark in there too. His lamp above him shall be put out. So there's his light where he can have security, see things. Now, he goes to his steps, doesn't he? Where does his steps lead? So he's walking now. He's been in his tent. That's not going to protect him. In fact, brimstone's going to always be around. This is the wicked. This is Bildad's description. The steps of his strength shall be straitened. They'll be restricted. His own counsel shall cast him down. You know, he thought he was right, and it's going to cast him down. It cast him into a net by his own feet, and he walketh upon the toils. What do you think he's placing Job about this time? Your own counsel got you here. God's not the problem. You're the problem that's destroying yourself. And this is the way it works with wicked men. And Job, you're kind of fitting that picture. I can see him driving it home, where he's throwing this out here and where his intentions are going after him. Terrors, with verse 11, shall make him afraid. Verse 12, his strength shall be hunger bitten. I like the way God just does it concisely. He does go through a lot of, his strength, well, you need food to have strength, and strength is hunger bitten. And calamity shall be ready at his side. He's walking, his feet are going into entrapment, and who's beside him? Calamity. He's not going to avoid this. The members of his body shall be devoured. Yea, the firstborn, or the preeminent one of death, shall devour his members. He shall be rooted out of his tent, wherein he trusteth. See, tent's a place of refuge. How did I come up with that? But you just read it in verse 6, but I didn't read about it in refuge. I read it in verses 14. That's a place where you trust. Your light's going out. It's going to be dark as it is outside. And you shall be brought at the king of terrors. You'll be brought before him. And who's going about your tent? There shall be those that dwell in his tent, which was none of his. Brimstone shall be scattered upon his habitation. His roots shall be dried up beneath. And above all, his branch be cut off. His remembrance shall perish from the earth. He shall have no name in the street. He shall be driven from light into darkness and chased out of the world. And then verse 19, he shall have neither son nor son's sons among his people, for in the remaining where he sojourned. They that come after shall be astonished at his day, and they that went before were affrighted. Now you may have east and west, west and east. They came after, there's your west, shall be astonished. They that came before, there's the east. The King James uses those phrases. But I think what he's saying, whether you go from east to west, encompasses the whole world. When people hear this, they will be astonished as what has happened. And they indeed will be those who are affrighted. How can a good man, how come that could happen to him? But they're going to see that and realize that was the wicked man. And this is from, this is from Bildad's point of view, that they'll be astonished at the fact that God brought evil because he was a wicked man. And then scarcely such are the dwellings of the unrighteous, and this is that place of him that knoweth not God. It says, surely such are the dwellings of the unrighteous. That's the way he looks at wicked people. And Job, you sure do look like that guy. God has brought it down on you. Did you lose your family? Did you lose your servants? Yes. I don't have my friends, and my God's against me. That's where Job is. And so he begins in chapter 19. So the wicked don't prosper. And that's not true. That's not true. Job will point holes in that. Wicked sometimes do prosper. How long will you vex my soul and break me to pieces with words? These 10 times, whether that's literal or whether that's symbolical of completeness and fullness, which sometimes is found in the Bible. God says, you tried me these 10 times out in the wilderness. Was it, how many were they? 10? They could have been just complete. You constantly did that. So whether it's 10, it could be 10 literally. A lot of times it's indicating fullness. It just always, there was completeness of how many times you reproach me. You're not ashamed that you deal hardly with me. And be it indeed that I have erred, mine error remaineth with myself. If I have erred, it's with me and it's secret because I have not confessed it. That's reality. If indeed ye will magnify yourselves against me and plead against me my reproach, know now that God has subverted me and hath compassed me about with this net. Thank you for being your friends. And God has brought that about. So, defiant Job. Hold on to his integrity. He's not a wicked man. And that's what he's trying to get him to them to realize as well. So, question 13. Well, I'm saying he's addressing it to Job. What does Job say about his friends and himself and God? So let's look at these 6 verses. What does he say about himself? Let's talk about his friends first, so we get in order. You reproach me. You're not ashamed that you deal hardly with me. Have they dealt hardly with him? Yeah, we'd say so. What does he say about himself? If I've erred, it's secret with me. I'm not confessing. You haven't convinced me. And what does it say about God? God has allowed this to happen, to put it nicely. He hath compassed me about with this net, with his net, and I'm now in this predicament. And does he believe in the sovereignty of God? Yes. And sometimes, no, Job, you got that wrong. You tell me where he got it wrong. When you read the first few chapters of Job, how did he get it wrong? Well, he doesn't tempt us to do, he doesn't entice us to do evil, and that's true, but he tests us. And Job is going through the agony of that test of having answers not there. Because he is righteous and he's suffering for that. And it goes against the philosophies of the day. I mean, we keep coming back to that, but we're picking up details of that. What is so pitiable about Job's plight in verses 13 of chapter 19 through 22? And this, to me, is sad, but it shows you who does he turn to? He hath put my brethren far from me, and mine acquaintance are wholly estranged from me. So my brothers and my familiar friends My kinsfolk have failed. My familiar friends have forgotten me. How can you forget your friend Job and what he's going through? They're not there. They that dwell in my house, he talks about his maids, he talks about his servants. When I ask them to come, they don't come. They have no respect for his authority. I'm an alien in their sight. They don't serve me. I call my servant, and he giveth me no answer. What disrespect is that? I ain't going to answer him. Though I entreat him with my mouth, he heard me. My breath is strange to my wife, whether he's so sick and repulsive that his wife feels that way about him. Could be. He was very sick with the boils. And it says, and my supplication to the children of mine own mother. That's his brothers, our sisters. It's strange. They don't want to hear my breath. They don't want to have anything to do with me. Even young children despise me. Young children are pretty forgiving and pretty receptive. We have to warn them too much because they get too free. No, don't worry about Joe. They're not going to be around him. They don't want anything to do with him either. And all my familiar friends about me, and they whom I have loved, are turned against me. My bone cleaveth to my skin, to my flesh. I am escaped with the skin of my teeth. It's just barely holding on. Have pity upon me, O my friends, for the hand of God hath touched me. God is touching me. Yeah, he is. Because he could control all things, but he's already told the devil, you don't take his life. He put limitations on Satan. We need to understand that about God. And why do you persecute me? Why do you persecute me as God and are not satisfied with my flesh? You got my flesh. Why do you persecute me as God? You're trying to take my life. Only God can do that. That's sad. Or he's pitiable. He has nobody to turn to. He doesn't get answers from God. And why are you not sad? You got my flesh, all you people that are around me. Why do you act like God and want my life? God could take care of that. And again, way down here. And yet, I got a witness up in heaven. He's all over the map, and that's exactly where you now be. If we have to go through those things. Question number 13. In Job's conviction about his laughter at the dead, is it firmer in chapter 19 than in chapter 14? By comparing those, and before we get into his feelings about it, what would you say? I do too. It's exactly right. And it's right. And it may be he realized that he would wait for a redeemer in chapter 14 if he knew he would come. Well, that's pretty good, but it's firmer because he gives more details, doesn't he? In this section, and that becomes very important. That indeed he gives more details about this. So look at these verses. Well, I'm trying to see what I know. Our time is short. Start with verse 23. Oh, that my words were now written. Oh, that they were inscribed in a book, that with an iron pen and lead they were graven in the rock forever. For a long time, this idea of lead, you describe things in a rock, we got that down, but they would put the lead in there. For a long time, there was not any evidence for that being taking place. In the 1700s, especially with Rawson in the 1800s, they found it was 5 columns, 441 words about the Persian king. And that indeed his testimony about himself was Darius the Great. They found it in Iran, and it's in a place. It's in a limestone wall, and they found that it was lead in those letters. Some of them have been destroyed in World War II. Things that have happened, but they found that. But what gets me, what has been inscribed forever? Has his words been described? A lot better than limestone. Have you ever been to Iran and saw this Darius remains? If you have, you love history and all that, great. But has his words been inscribed in stone? Greater than stone? So it'd be there forever? God has an interesting way of working things out, doesn't he, to answer our prayers. And he did this. But as for me, I know that my Redeemer liveth. And at last he will stand up upon the earth, and after my skin, even this body is destroyed, then without my flesh I shall see God. Did he believe in the resurrection? Did he believe in Jesus Christ? You know, all those things come, but he believes that after his flesh goes through this, he indeed will see God. Where even when in chapter 14 he said, I would have hope, and if I could indeed just put me in shield or protect me from what I'm going through, and that'll be fine. Well, here he is after I'm dead and gone. He'd like to be brought back after he goes through the trial in chapter 14. But now it's way up here. Even if I die, I'm going to see him, whom I shall see on my side. And mine eyes shall behold not as a stranger. My heart is consumed within me. If you say, how we will persecute him, and that the root of the matter is found in me, be afraid of the sword. He's speaking to his friends. For wrath bringeth the punishment of the sword, that you may know there is a judgment. You've been persecuting a righteous man. He's way up here with righteousness of God. God will take care of the enemies. Did he do that with Daniel's accusers? Yeah. He'll do that. And I'll see him after I'm dead and gone. And my Redeemer liveth. And it's God. So there's his faith. And that's what makes it so tragic. I have nobody, he doesn't understand God, but he's not giving up on God at all. Any comments you might have on that? I know we're running time. Compare Zophar's charges against Job with Bildad's. That may take a while. You got 1 minute. 55 seconds. Let's say Bildad says the wicked are going to be punished. But look at verse 5. That the triumphing of the wicked is short, and the joy of the godless is for a moment. It's like it's going to happen in this life, and the wicked are going to be destroyed in this life, and it's going to be quick. They're going to be destroyed earlier, but now, Zophar, it's going to be done quickly. And that's not correct. Job understands that, because Job in chapter 21 is going to answer that. Do the righteous die when the bone marrow is strong in them? Or the unrighteous die? Or do they live a long time sometime? What's been your experience? Yeah. Sometimes people are just wicked. They live a long time. So I can see it happening sometime, but it's not the universal answer. That's the issue. It's not happening where that's the universal thing. No, that's not true. You haven't answered the problem. Wicked are going to be destroyed, and you're just saying it happens real quickly. They don't last very long. The evil die young. Don't you know that? And sometimes they prosper Job has been bringing that. That's a reality. Sometimes the people that the wicked prosper. He said that from the very beginning, and that hasn't been disproven, and it's true. And that sometimes wicked don't last very long. And what's God doing? Trust me. Trust God. Be ready anytime. But it doesn't mean that you're unrighteous, because you suffer and you die when you're young. And that's why they don't have an answer for him. And we will pick up with that and see how we would, question number 17, when we get there, what have you learned about comforting others from the study of this lesson? I hope you'll think about these, because you got a chapter and a half to look at for our next time. And we'll answer that and go into lesson 6. Thank you.